Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Our favorite eremite mercenary, Dehya, has punched her way into our roster of playable characters. In this video, we'll be taking a look at what a Constellation 0 Dehya can do if you choose to hire her. Alright, I'm usually a pretty positive person when it comes to most characters in Genshin Impact. Most of them are unique and useful in some interesting way. And, well, what about Dehya? Now, her design is absolutely impeccable, her personality an absolute gem, and her animations look absolutely incredible. As for her combat prowess, well, I think miHoYo might have gotten sick of making too much money. We'll be taking a look at a lot of different things Dehya can do, including a burst pyro DPS build, a vape build, a support build, a melt showcase, and after all that, I'll be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. For the first part of the showcase, which will be of her kit, she is using the luxurious Sea Lord at Refinement 5. For her artifacts, she is using the 4-piece emblem of Severed Fates. She is of course at Constellation 0 throughout this entire video, and her talents are at 9, 9, and 9. Starting off with her normal attacks, Sandstorm Assault. She has a bad donkey looking basic attack animation. Sadly, the damage Dehya is doing with her normals and charge attacks is negligible considering she's built here for pyro damage. On a side note, I absolutely love her normal attack string animation as it looks a lot like Nightmare's animations from Soul Calibur 6. Let's move on to a very unique part of Dehya's kit, her elemental skill, Molten Inferno. Molten Inferno does a lot of stuff, with the first stuff being that you can plop it down and it creates a big circle. Then after the plop, it can bop an enemy once every 2.5 seconds when you do damage to it. Each bop is doing a monstrous 4005 damage on crit and appears to generate a pyro particle 100% of the time from my observations. The next stuff in the long list of stuff that it does is that you can hop a single time during its 12-second duration. This hop does some damage and allows you to relocate her elemental skill, although the hop does not refresh its 12-second duration. The next stuff her elemental skill does is that every single hit from her elemental skill applies pyro. This includes the plop, the hop, and the bop. In total, it's possible to apply pyro 7 times with Dehya's elemental skill. And as we can see, Barbara here is able to vape almost every single hit from it. Sadly, despite all the vapes, it's still not really doing much damage. And if you thought that was all the stuffs her elemental skill does, it still does even more stuffs. As we can see in this clip, on the left, Ganyu is getting smacked around by the Primo Geovishap's Spin the Wind attack, and on the right, we can see Dehya's plop adds a significant amount of super armor. Ganyu is able to sit through 2 of the Primo Geovishap's Spin the Wind attacks thanks to Dehya's passive Unstinting Succor, which adds the gold forged form state that significantly increases a character's resistance to interruption for 9 seconds after using her plop. Ganyu is also taking significantly reduced damage thanks to the damage reduction / sharing that Dehya's elemental skill provides, and Dehya is taking that damage gradually in Ganyu's stead. Phew, we can finally stop the plop, bop, and hop and drop on over to the next part of her kit. Her elemental burst, the Leonine Bite. By mashing left click like the truly skilled gamer that I am, Dehya can do up to 10 punches and ends her 10 punch combo with a slam at the end. And this part is incredibly important to note. Despite mashing left click during Dehya's elemental burst, it does not work with Xingqiu and Yelan's bursts. Again, it does not work with Xingqiu and Yelan's burst. I need to say it one more time so that way you guys know. Dehya's elemental burst does not work with Xingqiu and Yelan's bursts. Let's now use her entire kit to bash in our Regicide friend's face. Unfortunately, even with such a raw pyro damage focused build, Dehya was not able to single cycle our Regicide friend. Well, let's see if this Dehya build can succeed in a full team. This is what I will call the Burning PP team, also known as a pure pyro team. As we can see, with only 4-star teammates and 4-star weapons, this Burning PP team was able to roast our robot chicken in a single rotation. Well, let's be honest here, Xiangling did a lot of the damage, but Dehya still did contribute. But you might be wondering, what about vape? That's right, Dehya is indeed a pyro character and thus can vape. For this build, Dehya is using a Refinement 5 Rain Slasher and the 4-piece Gilded Dream. Let's see how much damage she can do with her elemental skill. Each bop is now critting for 10,017 damage on vape, and now the hop did 18,316 damage on vape. And sadly, even with vape, her elemental skill isn't able to take out the Regicide, but at least now it's certainly non-negligible damage. Let's try to vape her entire kit. Funnily, Nilo happens to be the most reliable way for Dehya to actually vape her entire kit. We can observe a couple things in this clip. Her elemental burst's punches have standard ICD, vaping 4 times over the 10 hits. And the last combo finisher Slam has its own independent ICD and also vapes. And with the power of needing another 5-star character to actually vape her entire kit, Dehya was barely able to knock out our Regicide friend. Another role that Dehya can actually fulfill is that of a support character. One team that does appreciate additional pyro application is Melt Ganyu. My personal favorite variation to use Dehya as a support with Melt Ganyu is with Nahida. Dehya provides Ganyu with a much needed super armor, while also making it easy and more reliable to apply enough pyro to melt all of Ganyu's charge shots. I especially like this clip because it also demonstrates that Dehya's added super armor wore off before Dehya's elemental skill did, or perhaps Ganyu's interruption resistance bar was depleted or something like that. Either way, the super armor is nice when it works and does allow Ganyu to shoot her massive bazooka blasts. Well, I'm feeling a bit dejected by her performance, so let's cheer ourselves up with a melt showcase. With a serpent spine and food. And by using Dehya's highest accessible multiplier, which is actually her plunge attack, we were able to do this fancy trick in using the green warpy thingy to do a plunge attack against Mr. Scaramucci, doing a modest 348,644 damage. Alright, it's finally time to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to Dehya. In the background, we will have the Burning PP team clearing Abyss 12. Let's start with the good. Dehya is a really endearing character, and her design is stellar. Her animations feel impactful, and her kit is unique. Also, as you can see in the background, the pure Pyro team is functional enough if you really want to make her work, and she does have some other functional team comps as well. Now, of course, other Pyro characters will do more damage than Dehya does in this comp, but Dehya does actually have her own unique set of advantages, mainly being a lot more difficult to interrupt, or having less opportunity cost for not vaping her damage in comparison to a character like Hu Tao. She's also relatively easy to use in a pure Pyro team. Dehya does provide a bit of utility and nearly perfect super armor for at least a few seconds. Anyway, that's where the good ends. Outside of a pure Pyro team, Dehya really struggles to find a niche. Do you need super armor? Well, Zhongli exists, and he improves your team's damage with his resistance shred, and he completely mitigates damage instead of splitting it. You can often get away with no healer and face tanking stuff with Zhongli, but with Dehya, you will absolutely need a healer if you plan to face tank anything. Do you need pyro damage? Well, Xiangling, Hu Tao, and Yoimiya are all ridiculously good pyro damage characters. Remember, Dehya wasn't even able to single cycle the Regisvine, while for the aforementioned characters and even Klee, such a task is completely trivial. Do you need a bit of pyro application every 2.5 seconds? Sadly, such slow off-field pyro application is just not needed in any team. And of course, Xiangling exists and does way more off-field damage and pyro application than Dehya does. Do you want to use her for Burgeon? Well, Thoma exists and he is infinitely better for Burgeon due to his much faster tick rate. And finally, the worst part about her is that her multipliers are just way too low. All this could be justified if she just did a lot of damage. Anyway, this is just the bad. Let's also talk about the ugly. Dehya's kit reminds me of pre-buffed Zhongli. Low impact, not a remarkable amount of damage, and finally, it actually feels bad to use her. The most important thing to know is that Dehya's elemental burst doesn't even work with Xingqiu and Yelan and similar things like that. So please take this into consideration if you're thinking about wishing for Dehya. Dehya also doesn't have super armor while trying to plop down her elemental skill. This means that she will be frequently interrupted while trying to provide super armor to the team, similar to how Zhongli was always interrupted when he was trying to cast his shield back in the day before he was buffed. Dehya's super duper armor team buff also only lasts for 9 seconds. And after those 9 seconds, it barely feels like you have any super armor at all. Given that her E has a 20-second cooldown and the Gold Forged State has an 18-second cooldown, you have tons of downtime on her super duper armor, and the visual indication is difficult to see. This leads you to just getting tossed around when you are expecting to actually face tank something, which just feels really bad. Next, her elemental burst puts away her elemental skill. This leads to a couple of issues, but first of all, she can't even generate and catch particles during her elemental burst, so she actually has tons of energy issues if you're planning to use her burst a lot. And during her burst, the auto-targeting is wonky. It's really hard to keep enemies grouped up during it, and she can even be frozen during her elemental burst. This would all be acceptable again if she just did a lot of damage, but alas, she does not. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm quite disappointed in Dehya. Is she completely useless? No, of course not, as she does have viable team comps. It's just that it's hard to justify getting her in comparison to almost any other featured 5-star character. Her main issue isn't that she's completely useless, it's just that there's always a better alternative for literally everything she does, and the combination of her strengths isn't enough to outweigh that. Of course, if you really like Dehya like I do, you can absolutely make her work. Sadly, Dehya really feels like she is suffering from a severe case of the Kuki syndrome, where miHoYo perhaps has something planned for her in the future. However, I'm also not entirely sure about this either, since Dehya is being tossed into the standard banner in the next patch, which means that it's very unlikely she'll get a dedicated rerun. Now, this also does open up some chances of getting her constellations for even free-to-plays, because when they lose their 50/50s, there is a chance that they will get Dehya. I'm personally hoping that Dehya will get a major facelift in the future, similar to how Kuki, Toma, and Kokomi all did. But until that day comes, stay strong, my fellow Dehya admirers, and may we have a good time playing Future Impact. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.
耐えられるかな。